Okay, so I made an executive decision. I'm cutting off that bottom rail. I'm going to calculate the weight of that to be 18 or 19 pounds. And to replace a piece of tubing with it is 23 pounds. Now I was going to replace some tubing across the back anyhow, because it had rolled and bent so damn awful bad. So I'm adding 7, 14, and then I don't know what the 5-foot piece is. I'm probably going to add about 30 pounds compared to what was there before. But while I was measuring from here to, I was measuring the top rail, right? I measured the bottom rails, and I got 2 different measurements for the length of the bottom rails. And I was like, well, if I'm cutting those off, that doesn't matter. Let me measure the top rails. This side was 95 7/8. Part of it has been eaten off right here at the end because of the weld they did for the gate latch, right? Come over here to this one, 95 3/4. And I measured it 3 times to make sure. So an 1/8 inch here, an 1/8 inch there, and you're welding your blocks in the wrong place, and next thing you know, your whole trailer's out of whack. So, yeah. I just thought one more measurement to tell y'all it was not the same from one side to the other. It just made me laugh. Yeah, so I made a decision, but we're going to have a little trouble with it because of my decision making. I got frustrated. I talked to my father about repairing this trailer as it was, and the only thing I can come out and figure out, they welded this top rail on one of the last things, and they had welded all the cross members across the bottom first, and that trailer must have been bent at the factory, and they just went along and put on the top rail and the uprights between it after they had already pre-bent the trailer. There is no way I added that much of an arch into this thing by trying to weld repair that. There is no way. It is you remember how the video before we gotten it down to where it was 1/8 of an inch of flatness? Once I straightened that out, you know, that had a bow in it going out. The top rails had a bow going out. The bottom rail had an arch. Once I straightened that top rail back out, that arch came right back into that top rail, like you wouldn't believe. So my decision was I'm going to cut off that bottom rail. That's just it. But the thing is, that is 2x2 angle iron laid on its side with the angle going up, like that. And the uprights are welded down to those, and the floor of the trailer is actually the bottom of the angle iron. So if I cut all those off, I'm going to have to replace all the uprights, which means I got to cut off the gate latches too and put them on something else. So that's a little frustrating, but I think I can manage that part, right? Right. You can do it. I can do it. We can figure it out. It may not be pretty, but we can figure it out. All right. So what I'm going to do, I've already cut my tubing. Now, I measured this tubing at the ends where they had cut it before. I measured it at the end here, and I measured it inside the holes. And every single time I measured it, I thought it was 3/16. And today, while I was cutting things and preparing them for weld, come to find out that tubing is not 3/16, but 1/8, which has become frustrating in and of itself. But that's okay, because why? We're replacing 1/8 inch angle iron anyway. We're just replacing it with square tubing, although rectangle tubing really is 3.5. So what I was talking about before about plating the bottom right along here, and to add support for the springs and the shackles, the spring shackle there and there. What we got is, if I keep the original width of the trailer, it's 60.5, right? 60.5 outside to outside edge. On these tubes, the spring perches are centered at 58.5. So what that means is there would only be a 1/2 inch of the tube center of the center line of the spring would be a 1/2 inch in on the tube on the insides, right? And I don't like that. That means most of the pressure is going to be leaning towards the outside. So what my thought was, After I get in these tubes, I'm going to do a couple of the cross members. I'm going to do the cross member here at the end, and here at the other end. I'm going to square the whole trailer up. I'm going to approximate the location for the trailer tongue here. It'll be somewhere in here where that hole is right there. And then a cross member here. And I'm going to go from the trailer tongue one back to the support that was about where that brace is right there. It goes across the back, right? All right, and so then I'm going to do a square tubing, piece of the same tubing across the back for the tailgate, because the tailgate was the one that was actually warped to the point of, well, let's look at it. This piece of metal right here was formerly known as the tailgate. And this isn't the bad end. Bad end is that end. And let me turn it around, you can look at it and see what I was talking about. See what I mean? Does that look like square and straight angle iron to you? That was formerly what the tailgate was on, so we're going to change that. And I'm going to take and cut about a 36-inch piece on each side of the tubing. And I'm going to put that on the inside from there to there and weld down the length of the trailer and put the spring perches on that, so I have a 3-inch wide rail for each of my spring perches. Because the overall width of the spring perch is 2 1/4 inches or something like that. So that's what I'm going to do. And yeah, that's where we're at right now. And I'm going to go back to cutting. I'm going to cut the 60.5-inch piece here for the tubing that goes, actually this is the front of the trailer. It goes on the back. We're going to cut that real quick. And we're going to lay our rails in here. I'm going to get this thing ready. I'm going to put this bottom together. And I don't need those side rails until I already have the bottom together. Right? So I can make my frame however I want here and make sure that it's right, and then I can put the top rail or side rails and all on. I'm not going to give my dad something that he has to throw away instantly and just go buy another cheap trailer. Why would I do that? I calculated the weight that I'm adding, and I'm adding about 45 to maybe 70 pounds extra weight from what I'm taking off and then putting back on. So I don't see where I'm adding that much more weight to this whole thing. I'm adding a basically 2x2. If it's 2x2 railing, 1.5 inches, I'm adding a 1/2 inch down the length on one side and an inch on the side here, and then the 1.5 inches here. So it would be 1.5 inches plus a 1/2 inch down there at the bottom, or minus a 1/2 inch at the bottom. So 1 inch and then 3 inches of angle iron, 1x3, 1.5 inches there at the top, or something like that. Yeah, 1 inch by 3 inches is what I'm adding, or an inch. So that'd be 5. I'm adding 5 inches more metal on each side. That's not that bad. Okay, and then I'm going to put 3/16 supports in between, because that's what I happen to have. All right, so that's it. I'm going to figure where I'm cutting that next, and I'll get back to you. Now here's a little funny one for you. I got my chop saw there, and I meant to record the very first time I used that, since I replaced it. But what we got, the problem we have, my 14-inch wheel has been reduced down to 8.5 inches. I wore it out, or had gotten close. Now, what I had not failed to notice over time is, as the wheel wears down, it becomes less flexible, right? Because it's not such a large distance from the center out to the edge, the wheel doesn't cast. And that's the problem with those saws. The wheels will cast as you cut with them, and they'll cut a line that swerves away from the center line that you're trying to cut. I hadn't noticed that in a very long time. Well, let me zoom in here. You see that wheel? That was the wheel that was on the saw here. That was the wheel. So I changed it out this morning as I tried to cut the first piece of tubing. And, well, needless to say, my saw instantly started going whoo, off to the side. And I became very frustrated with that. You have no idea how frustrated I got. So I started cutting everything. I just marked a square all the way around. I used a big black magic marker, marked a big fat line where I wanted to cut it, and then I came through with that little angle machinist square, silver one right there, and my pocket scribe from Stir It. Let's see here. There you go. Hold on, I'll even put the, you twist this end and you pull that out and you flip it around. There's your pocket scribe, right? Then I used the pocket scribe and marked an exact line that I could see through the black paint, or black marker. And I tried to follow as best I could, but then I had to sand it, grind it to the final fit. But that's all right. That's why I was using this big chop saw, because it had gotten where I didn't have to worry about that so much. But now it does. So I might put the 8.5 inch wheel back on and just lay the stuff down flat, but it doesn't like to cut through that first initial width. When it's very wide, it's better to cut on the narrow edge when you're using those saws. There's a lot less pressure and tension of the wheel cutting on a narrow section than on a big wide surface. Plus the wheel wears out quicker when you do wide surfaces. Well, anyway, I was trying to do that, but I think I might try it because, you know, it cuts so much better. Faster, I guess you would say. But that wasn't taking all that long with the 7-inch grinder. If I'd been using the 4.5, it would have taken a lot longer. Anyway, that was my fun little anecdote to go with this. Or is it really an anecdote? I guess maybe it's just a story. But maybe that is an anecdote. I don't know. Stay tuned. I'll be back.